I have for a while now been playing on the Oceanic servers. The new they're called Oceanic servers, but they're very much Australia focused. It probably should have been a sea server, a Southeast Asia server, because that would still be good for Australia, but would also be good for Southeast Asia. The problem with the Oceanic servers is nobody's fucking playing on them. Like, FF14 right now is in kind of a lull period where we're between like we're like in the middle point between the expansions. We're in the middle point between like big patches, things like that. So the player base just naturally is going to decline during that period. And the problem is that Oceanic didn't have a player base to decline. So when I first joined, it was great because everybody was joining to level their ults and get the free gil and get the free game time. So great, great during that period. That died out pretty quickly because once you've leveled your ults, hey, there's no reason to stick around with your ult because FF14 you can do everything on the same character. So unless you want to have ults for doing like RP stuff or ERP stuff, generally the ults don't really matter. Or if you're a weird person who wants to experience the story on different characters, I guess. But, like, there's not particularly much value in doing that, so most people don't bother. So a lot of people just play on one character, or they'll have just, like, a very low-level character they don't bother doing the story with on other servers just to, like, you know, go to house parties and nightclubs and whatever there. So, during that, like, probably 3 months after the big rush happened, that's when things started to, like, settle. And it wasn't, like, dead, but it was settled. So you could queue perfectly fine as a healer, as a tank. As a DPS, not so much, but DPS usually struggle in pretty much anything but, like, peak hour times. And that was good for a while. I really enjoyed that. The issue is that didn't last forever. So, especially now that I'm in Stormblood. So the first expansion, A Realm Reborn, it's great because you have a lot of like new players that are experienced in that. And then Heaven's Ward, the second expansion, is also fine. Stormblood, the third expansion, is where you're in that like middle period between the beginning of the game and the end game. And there's not that many people in that middle section, especially on Oceanic. So it got to the point where my daily roulettes, I would play as a healer, and it would take me about 15 minutes to queue, which I just don't want to deal with that. Like, the reason I play healer is for healer privilege. I want instant, just absolutely instant pop queues. If I wanted slightly slower queues, I would play a tank. Tanks usually pop pretty quickly. Healers go very fast because no one wants to play a healer. I actually kind of like healer gameplay, and I like having the entire team's stupidity in my hands, because when healing in FF14, especially on like outside of endgame content, is very easy. So if people are doing things they're supposed to do, especially now playing in a Scholar, which has an auto heal, a lot of the time I don't have to press my heal button. So when people do stupid things, it gives me something to do. I enjoy people being dumb. Like, if you want to pull the entire dungeon, fine, do it. You might die, but you might not. It gives me something to do, though. I at least have to, like, try and see what I can do and keep you alive. So yeah, I play healer because I like my insta-pop queues. I don't know how long it would take to queue as a DPS. I genuinely don't. FF14 doesn't have a distinction between like different types of DPS, like your magical DPS, your ranged DPS, your physical DPS. So when they're queuing as DPS, it's just generically DPS. It's different if you do like, you know, party finder stuff and like set up a specific party, but for general pug groups, it doesn't matter. And that's just for my duty stuff. Outside of duty stuff, it got even worse. So I'm doing the Stormblood Alliance raids. I say doing because I'm not really doing them on... Oh, I wasn't really doing them on Oceanic. I've moved now. I did the first one, which is... I forgot what the Alliance raids are called in Stormblood. F14 Stormblood Alliance. What is the first one called? Stormblood. The Royal City of Rabanastra. So I did that one. It took me about 3 hours to queue. I then tried to do the Readerana Lighthouse, and I queued. I think over the 3 or 4 days I did so, maybe 15 hours of queuing at like a bare minimum, and it's probably more. It was such a fucking mess. I couldn't do so. And then there were the Omega raids, which I'm also trying to do, which also wouldn't pop, like, at all. And the thing with Stormblood and the Omega raids is they're both in the Alliance raid for the Ivalice raids, and then the normal raid roulette for the Omega raids. But the thing with the thing especially on Oceanic, this happens on every server, but especially on this, there is a lot of people who do, I guess, what's being described as an eye-level cheese. So a lot of people don't want to do any of the Alliance raids besides Crystal Tower. Crystal Tower is the first one, and many argue is the easiest. And not just easiest, everybody knows the mechanics for Crystal Tower. Generally, you don't have wipes on that raid. Sometimes you have people who don't understand, like, stand behind the rock when you are at the behemoth. And sometimes you have people who don't exit the giant death circle when they're supposed to exit the giant death circle. But besides those, you're pretty much good. And usually, like, there's a healer or two that can res them, or like a red mage can't res during Crystal Tower, too low level. A summoner can do the res. That's usually fine. But the raids after that, people don't know as well, and sometimes people actually die, especially in the Void Arc. Yeah, Stormblood from what I've seen so far is not really causing an issue. Like, I've not gone into any of the Alliance raids and actually prepared for them. I just wing them. And usually, if you just pay attention to what other people are doing, you can pretty much work it out. Yeah. So, I've wanted to do the Stormblood raids, and I couldn't do them on Oceania. And that was the thing that broke me. I could deal with the 15-minute roulette. I could deal with story dungeons taking 30 minutes to queue on a healer. I could deal with that. I couldn't deal with over, like, 12 hours to queue for a single Stormblood raid. And it was only going to get worse from there, because that was the first tier, and I can't imagine the second tier it took so long. I can't imagine third tier was any better. Same with the Omega raids. I couldn't imagine that any of the Omega raids were going to be at all reasonable to queue. So, I eventually decided I am just going to move over to Aether. I was considering going back to Elemental being on the JP data center, and Aether being on the North American data center. The reason I didn't want to go back to Elemental, there's actually a couple of reasons. Firstly is the time zone. Time zone was a big one. So, if you've never played an MMO, a lot of people like to do their MMO gaming at, like, late at night. So, peak time on JP is, like, 6 p.m. onwards, usually to, like, 1 or so a.m., and the same is true in America as well. The difference is that 6 p.m. is when I wake up. So I wake up at around 8, 9 a.m., depending on what the day is. And pretty much the entire time that I would normally be playing FF14, like anywhere during that period, it's peak. I just play during peak all the time. And then when it's off peak, here's the thing, though. It doesn't even matter that it's peak and off-peak, because off-peak is still double still double the part. I think no, like 5x the party finder and double the like pug duty finder than it is on Oceanic during the peak. So it doesn't even matter. It's still bigger any time of the day.